And we're back. Hopefully. This is an
This is
entirely new recording
continuous
setup.
chaos.
This is continuous chaos.
This might just be like another one, like another start. Again. How many times have we started this? Like in a different kind of format, like 8 times?
Yeah, at least.
But this is better because even if this is kind of a different try, we've already posted it, so
it's true. Yeah,
it's real.
By the time you're listening to this, the podcast has been publicly available for a couple of weeks at least.
Longer than it ever should have been.
Yeah, we haven't been taken down by YouTube yet, so that's always good.
Hopefully, yeah.
Which, like, so this has been a super interesting process, just public. Also, I apologize for my voice because we're both sick. We're both sick right now. So I might sound like I'm going through puberty again. I have no idea what I sound like, but probably not great. Yeah, this has been a really interesting process, like actually processing all of these episodes to like post publicly because I've had to listen to all of these again.
So weird listening to them.
Yeah, it's been really weird, and I've also in doing so realized how fucking annoying I sound in the first couple of episodes.
You know what's so funny though? Because that was my thing, remember? Like I was always like paranoid about how I sounded, and now I just like don't fucking care.
Yeah, it's not like, but for me it wasn't really the sound of my voice, but like there's a whole bunch of habits that are fine when you're talking to a person in like a conversation, but when you record it and are posting it for other people to listen to, I realized how annoying that could be. And so I'm going to do my best to not do them in this episode, which is probably good, but also, I don't know, maybe you've already listened to like 4 episodes of this and you thought, wow, this guy's an asshole, and have left. So it'll be interesting.
I don't think that would be the result. I mean, it really bothered me listening to them. Like, I know you had little, like, it was fine, but oh, this isn't good. You can't be funny, because if you're funny, I'll cough.
Okay,
as you mentioned, I am sick too. But you're at the beginning kind of ish, and I'm at the tail end, so.
Yeah, hopefully I'm like late middle, but who knows?
When I was in the late middle, I was still like dying.
Yeah, I feel like I've gotten off lucky. My roommate, if this is like the extent of what has happened to me, then I feel like my roommate's gonna be really mad, because in the space of her getting crazy, like so sick to the point where I was surprised she was still going to work, I've gotten like sick and then also kind of like hopefully gotten over the hump and on my way to getting better, so I might actually get better before she does. I'm jinxing myself by saying this because now I'm gonna like die. Whatever I have is gonna be terminal.
Well, I hope not.
But
because like I can't set up any of the recording stuff, and also not just that, you're half of this podcast, so.
Yeah, that's yeah. There's a lot of things riding on me.
There's a lot of factors where we need you for this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was listening to it, the thing that really bugged me was how, like, we talk over each other, like, almost exclusively.
Yeah, that is true. We really do.
And like you said, like, it's not a problem when we talk, and it's not like we don't, like, we do talk to each other when we're not recording. That happens. We've had conversations in life where we don't have like a recorder device, and I don't feel like we have the same problems.
Yeah, it feel like in my memory there's a back and forth, but maybe this is the thing where we're just both misremembering how these things actually go. And whenever people start actually listening to this thing, well, we can ask our friends, I guess, and be like, is this what it's like all the time?
In our defense, though, even like I feel like they might say yes, like that it does sound like we're just talking over each other. But even if that's how it's perceived on the outside, I don't think of it that way, because it's not like we're talking over each other so much that I'm not hearing what you're saying or like comprehending it.
Yeah,
it's just that I think we both do it at such like a a high rate of speed.
Yeah, there's still an exchange of ideas happening. Like the conversation is happening.
It's just happening at a much faster rate than most people are accustomed to.
Yeah.
And so on the outside looking in, it just seems like we're ignoring the other person and just talking at each other. And like, I've been a part of conversations where that's actually true. And I never feel like that's what's happening with you and I. But I get that it probably seems like it is.
Yeah, I think, and we've talked about this before, possibly on mic in one of the previous forums of this podcast, but maybe not. About how like part of the flow of our conversation is that like we kind of when we start the sentence or like start forming an idea, both of us kind of get to where we're going before like
we have to get there
before our conversation actually gets there. And so we've already kind of gotten to the point that we need, and then we move on to the next thing. So I think that's also part of it that like people probably wouldn't understand just from listening to this mess of a podcast. Is that like when we're like our flow of conversation is accelerated by the fact that like we kind of like know each other well enough that we kind of get where we're heading before maybe
it's almost like actually arrive. Like we're doing it for the podcast. Like I never thought of it that way, but like the way that we keep talking when it starts to feel flat, it's because we've already finished that conversation and we're just we're saying the words so that the conversation can like present itself as finished, but we finished like it was already done like 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, this is actually really interesting because like so it's in a way like even though this podcast like the reason we started doing it is because we kind of wanted some form of documentation of the conversations that have happened between us. It's not really like an authentic representation of it because we have to finish each idea so that the audience can stay with us.
The podcast is at fault for why we sound confusing.
Yeah, it's really a hindrance in a lot of ways.
When we're just talking, we don't have to like finish thoughts because we sort of just like read each other's minds. So if the podcast was an authentic representation of our conversations, it literally wouldn't make any sense. So if anyone's listening to this being like, but it doesn't make sense now, just rest assured that like,
understand that this is like 1,000 times better than watching us in person. That said, look forward to the Continuous Chaos live show.
Oh yeah, that'll be great. I mean, maybe it could be better or it could be way worse because if it's live, we might just try harder to make it like make everything make more sense and then it'll just get even worse. Who knows?
That's us jumping the shark, is trying to actually like have a conversation publicly.
But also like I'm excited for when I'm not sick. Like you're doing an awesome job at talking and being a human right now. But like I'm afraid of what the last few minutes are going to sound like because when I laugh or when I like I start coughing and then I try to say words, I really need to stop doing that right now because I probably sound like a pterodactyl. And I'm like really nervous to hear what this sounds like.
Yeah, I'm also really excited. So this might be another lost episode that will I don't know, it'll be like a Patreon tier of like listen to all the weird stuff that got left on the cutting room floor of the podcast.
Like nobody wants to pay for that or like do any like nobody wants an exchange of anything when this is the result. Like it's not worth it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Like it's too terrible. Like this is just like a freebie. This is just, like if you have an extra, day to just listen. I mean, that's really our whole podcast. It's like if you have an extra like hour or two every couple weeks where you're just perfectly fine to never get that time back, then listen to our podcast. And this is a good example of that.
Yeah, and like everyone does, I've seen the Netflix numbers. So.
Oh no, totally. That's really a legit thing, but like this isn't scripted, so I don't know what somebody has to be missing in their life where they're like, yes, I can't wait to listen to this podcast. And right now, those people are our friends that I just insulted. But in their defense, like a couple of them have like messaged me and they're like, oh yeah, like I'm so sorry, I haven't had time to. And I'm like, why are you apologizing?
Yeah,
like,
I would be astonished.
That's the normal state of being.
The idea of someone finding the time to listen to this podcast would be astonishing to me. Like that they haven't had time yet is like, oh yeah, that's just what regular people do, like in the course of their day.
Right. Yeah, and like you have a life, you have a job, you're normal.
Yeah,
and like,
absolutely.
yeah, like so you chose to watch a Netflix show instead of listening to this podcast. That makes sense. When you decide to listen to this podcast instead of watching Netflix,
like that's an error in judgment.
We're not very good at promoting ourselves.
No, not even a little bit. That's why I'm going to be really excited if this thing takes off. It's just like
the whole podcast is just like, don't listen to this. Stop listening to it. Turn it off now.
The entire thing is really an exercise in the idea of failing upwards.
So, do you have anything like interesting to talk about?
I was
like, do we ever?
Well, you said the word pterodactyl, and my mind immediately went to the Jurassic World, the new Jurassic World trailer. I don't know if you've seen it.
That's interesting, because I was just watching Jurassic World the other day, the first one.
Oh, what'd you think of Jurassic World?
And I love those movies. I really do.
Yeah, I love the first Jurassic Park, and yeah, no, the second one's really good too.
It's such an homage to the first Jurassic Park.
It is. It feels very much like Jurassic World is to Jurassic Park the way that like Star Wars The Force Awakens is to Star Wars A New Hope Episode 4.
Yeah.
Like it's very clearly patterned off of it. I still lean towards liking the original more in both cases. But I'm also glad that like there's more Star Wars and more Jurassic Park happening and kind of.
But it's also done in a way that it doesn't feel like a reboot where they ignore everything, and so like it gives me warm fuzzies.
Yeah, it's fun. I had a great time with Jurassic World. I'm excited to see what happens here.
I am excited too. I heard that there's going to be tons of dinosaurs in this one.
Yeah, so you haven't seen the trailer yet? Then yeah.
Actually, no, I'm a liar. I didn't, because I got on the bandwagon the day before the trailer was released. So I watched the teaser. So yeah, I guess I haven't seen the actual trailer.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I am very excited for it.
Yeah, it's real. It looks real good. I'm pretty excited for it. Like I said, I'm kind of just generally excited.
You're just like pro Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
Jurassic friend.
Yeah, like the first Jurassic Park was and still is like one of my favorite movies, hands down. I love that franchise, and I personally feel it's one of the most important movies ever created. But yeah, so I throw behind Jurassic Park in a big way.
Yeah, I can get on board with that. I just like everything about it. And my dad thinks I'm lying because when I was a kid, I hated it. Like I was terrified of the Jurassic Park movies. Because as I know comes as a shock to you, I don't like horror or scary movies at all.
What? Yeah, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, I obviously put it in the same bucket as like I thought it was like a horror. And I don't know why I thought that.
I mean, to be fair, like the sequences where the kids are like hiding from the Velociraptors in the first movie, has definitely like has some of that feel to it. Like I actually did, yeah. Like Jurassic Park is actually one of the only movies I've ever had like nightmares as a direct cause of, because yeah, when I was a kid, like I had nightmares about the Velociraptors. And
yeah,
then
okay.
shortly
So I guess that's fair.
Yeah, I don't think that's undeserved at all. Like that's a legit scary sequence, especially if you see it as a kid, and I did.
Well, yeah, and as a kid, like you're scared of like monsters, right? And like they're monsters that we don't have in our world, so of course they're scary. Yeah. Yeah, I never really felt like it was something I had to justify. That like the child that I was afraid of the giant dinosaurs that eat people's heads, but like my dad didn't totally get it. And and I think he bugs me about it now, but we were talking about this like last week actually, where I was like, I just watched the Jurassic Park movie and Jurassic World, and I love it. And my mom was like, really? Like, why? And I think she's only seen it like once or something. And I've seen that movie quite a few times because I like how it has that reboot feeling without being like ignoring what it used to be. So it's a very inclusive reboot, and I really like reboots like that. And it's just like a really easy movie to watch, like they all are. Like they're just really I don't know, they're easy. There's lots of characters. There's lots of people that you can get on board with, and
you can like find your person to kind of attach to.
And it's compelling because it's not something that we live with. Like I don't know about you, but like I don't have dinosaurs that I'm around a lot. So it's an interesting kind of thought experiment, right? And yeah, I actually didn't watch them until I was a little bit older. Like I was probably like late teens, early adulthood when I actually like first watched all of the Jurassic Park movies in like a very serious, like I'm going to sit down and watch this movie kind of a way.
Right.
But I've loved them ever since I've done that. And anytime I talk with them though, that's like the running joke is that I used to be terrified of them as a kid. And yeah, like I think he was like dead serious because he was like, my dad was like, oh, like you really like Jurassic World that much? Like what happened? Like you hated them. And I had to be like, well, yeah, because they were fucking scary. Like they're dinosaurs. They're scary. And he's like, well, like what changed? And I'm like, well, I'm 25. Like, first of all, like I don't know how to explain.
I've had an entire decade and a half of life experiences that have allowed me to understand that like velociraptors are not a thing that can threaten me.
Right, like I have the critical thinking. Like I went to university and I gained the critical thinking skills necessary to watch a movie about scary dinosaurs and feel like safe from them.
Which is good.
But no, like it is. It's a life skill, really, that I'm glad I acquired. Like if university did anything for me, I'm glad it gave me that the ability to watch Jurassic Park
with the reality that velociraptors are not in our
amazing ability to cope. It's true, and I mean velociraptors are scary. Like all of these dinosaurs are fucking scary.
It's true, yeah.
And they're very pointy. Like that's the thing about dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. Like I don't even just mean their faces. Like everything about them is like sharp and pointy. And like who the fuck wouldn't be scared of that?
They got
like,
a lot friendlier in general, I feel like, once the discovery was made that most of them had feathers, I think. Like that makes me feel a little bit.
Yeah. Like, and I don't mean like dinosaurs like actual dinosaurs, but like, Jurassic Park dinosaurs, like the way that we pop culture dinosaurs are sharp and scary.
I remember being really bummed when I found out that velociraptors weren't actually that big though. Like they, I just remember that.
I feel like that's true of a lot of like media. Like there's dinosaurs that you think are very big and they're not, and then the ones that you think are like unassuming, they're like massive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of just like, none of us are prepared for the dinosaurs to return is really what I'm getting at. Like none of us would know how to cope with that because we've been given all this false information.
That's true. Yeah, we would start seeing dinosaurs and then we'd be like, what? I don't understand. Like those aren't the dinosaurs that I grew up with. Those aren't the dinosaurs that I know.
And like, yeah, and I know that like me saying that sounds ridiculous. Like that, that everything about this conversation is ridiculous, but seriously, like, I feel like we'd almost be better prepared for the return of dinosaurs if we didn't have so much misinformation. Like, if we were going in blind, we would be better prepared than the information that we have now.
Because at least you would be in the mode of, like, trying to figure everything out, whereas, like, if you've already presupposed all of this dinosaur knowledge, then you're kind of screwed, because you're going to be expecting them to do... Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Like, we have expectations of what they're going to do and what they're going to be like.
Yeah, do you think it would be like a Flintstones thing, where eventually they would be like part of our like technology, like we would just drive to work on a Triceratops or whatever?
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, that would be.
We had a lengthy conversation about how I want to be like walking alone in the desert. So like, this is like dinosaurs excite me in the way that like post-apocalyptic worlds like excite
because
me
it's the idea of like a return to that like kind of primitive.
It's like it's just a different world.
Yeah.
Like that's what I like about it, and like I like the idea that they could maybe incorporate into kind of a like a morphed world of what we have. So like it wouldn't be what we have now, and it wouldn't be what they had then. It would be like and it wouldn't be a Flintstone world because that's very like it's like cave people, and I think that for whatever reason or whatever like sci-fi excuse you could come up with that like the dinosaurs were to return, it could be an interesting kind of like combination world of all these things. And yeah, like I would love to like just like I really like the ones that they use for like showering, like the Flintstones, like or the ones they use to like wash dishes, where they just have all these dinosaurs. And I don't think they ever show it, but
the
like
bird one that's
in
like
their
a
house,
record player, like yeah.
There's all these windows where there's dinosaur heads just poking into your house so it can like perform a task, like it's your sink or it's your faucet or it's your shower head. But then that means that if you were to go outside that house, which they never show, you'd have like 6 dinosaurs like around the house, just like chilling with their head inside the house,
waiting to be your garburator.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, like the Flintstones, like I find that titillating. I find the Jetsons titillating too, for like the same reasons, even though they're like the opposite reasons.
I really like the theory that the Jetsons and the Flintstones exist in the same time period.
Yeah.
And
how freaking awesome is that?
I know. That was one fan theory I really bought into. I was like, all right, yeah, this is legit. I feel okay about this being.
I love fan theories. I love like
good fan theories are amazing.
They just make like me happy, and they make like they give me warm fuzzies, and they kind of make my like hair stand up straight in like a way that I find very like gratifying. And then I wonder like how other people consume fan theories, if they're just like, oh, that's like stupid. Like I'm like, are you dead inside? Like that's the coolest thing ever.
Maybe they just didn't find a good one. Maybe they found a dumb one.
The fan theories about like Frozen and like the Little Mermaid,
like the shared Disney universe, like they're all in the same.
Like yeah, like that. Like it blows my fucking mind.
Yeah, that one. Was
like I love that, and that's one like I will judge people based on their opinions on that. Like not in like a legitimate way, but like I kind of like I'm like, were you not hugged enough? Like why? Like. How is that not titillating? Like, and also I love the word titillating because it like perfectly describes what the feeling of being titillated feels like is that word.
That's probably
like the word titillating is titillating.
Yeah, that's true. I was thinking of because the sensation of like when you get like chills running up your spine or whatever is like the word that I've always used and known for that is frisson.
Oh,
and it's like a French word to describe that sensation, I believe. Either that or I'm just saying it with a French accent, and I've just made that up on the spot now. I'll find out after this podcast, or I'm listening back to it, and remember to actually look up this word. But I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
It's definitely fancier than my word, so...
I think they're both fun for their own reasons.
They both have merit.
Yeah.
They have a place in the world, much like dinosaurs and Flintstones and Jetsons and fan theories.
Everything has its place.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I had a thought about the Jurassic Park thing, but I mean, we could easily allow this Jurassic Park discussion to like devolve into like my larger feelings about like the ocean and like also space and those things, because like they feel very similar to me. Like my feelings about like the ocean. And like I shook my head just now. Like I can't not have a visceral reaction to just talking about. I don't like the ocean, for anyone who's wondering. I don't. But I've never talked to you about the Jurassic Park like prehistoric that thing. Like I feel much the same about that as I do about space.
Really?
because it's just as immense. Like
Right.
this
Okay.
concept of like a dinosaur like walking and like they take a step and now they've like covered like however many city blocks. Like it's the whole playing with like perspective and like size and what we know and kind of the labels we put on things. I like thinking about like a prehistoric world where like the places we live and work and are as humans now were like granular in the like the grand scheme of like the world the dinosaurs inhabited. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. Like you're, yeah, like if you're thinking about like a like an Ultrasaurus or like a Brachiosaurus, something like gigantic. Yeah, like their perspective on all of the stuff that we're doing and building and creating is so uh foreign and small to them, right? Like they
Yeah,
it's sort of like
I just like playing around with that.
yeah, what was there was a story, or maybe it was a story. Anyways, they were talking about an anecdote about like if like a lion learned English, you still wouldn't be able to understand each other because your um reference points and like the way that you formed ideas as like a human versus as a lion would still render you like unable to communicate even if you had like a common language or way to pass that information. It'd
Oh,
be kind
that's
of like
fascinating.
that, just like with a dinosaur instead of a lion, I guess.
And with size instead of language.
Yeah, exactly. Like
Kind
yeah,
of.
just
Yeah.
the scales, and like I don't know that the dinosaurs would have necessarily like a culture, but like the those like points of understanding for a dinosaur would be very different, and a large dinosaur at that than like a human.
It's like the idea of like Horton Hears a Who or like Men in Black, which are two
Yeah.
things that like you wouldn't think you can talk about in the same sentence, but you know
both
what I mean.
things that I love. So
Yeah, so and they're random in pop culture kind of, so like they make sense to be and live here on this podcast. But that idea of like, well, let's talk about Horton Hears a Who for the example, but this idea that like we're a speck, um, the dinosaur thing to me is like aligns with that idea much the same way. And it's just another example of how we're pretty insignificant. And maybe that sounds depressing, but I think it's very empowering. I think it's a very cool thing to like ruminate in.
yeah, I think it's a really like I think it's one of those things where like the scale doesn't necessarily determine the importance of what's going on, which is like
Yeah,
a good thing to keep in
absolutely.
mind, like in general, I guess.
I think it's like a good like way to live as humans because it's very easy for us to just act like we're like the top of the food chain kind of thing. And I think that like this could this is often a discussion around say like your choices of food and like vegetarianism, veganism, and eating animals, that kind of whole
Mm-hmm.
topic. And if that's a trigger warning, I'm sorry for whoever might be offended. I don't really want to like go into that because I don't have a whole lot of vocabulary or blah, 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 blah. That was me not knowing how to talk. That's bloopers. And the thing about this is that like the whole podcast is like one giant blooper. So I'm just going to let that go and just jump back into it. But I don't have the vocabulary around that discussion to like do it justice. But I know that this is kind of this is the beginning, like the tip of the iceberg of that conversation. Just knowing that, you know, if we are on some concept or planet or like whatever kind of like world you're looking at, if we are like equivalent to say a cow, then we need to recognize the fact that like nothing is just like an ant or a cow or something that we see as like disposable or insignificant. Like everything has its purpose and everything, like every life matters. I think that like for me, I can appreciate that. And yes, I do eat meat, but I try to be very conscious about where my food comes from and just know that, because I think that like whether you make the choice to eat meat or not to eat meat, you can still be conscious of the fact that like your food doesn't just show up at the grocery store. Like it's that kind of conversation around just knowing that we're not the top of the food chain and we can't just look at everything kind of quote unquote below us and just take it for granted. I guess is what I'm getting at.
The decisions and the choices that you're making, like however big or small they are, like the consequences are still there, also big or small. It doesn't, like, the size of the issue doesn't exempt you from the consequences of those decisions, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's fair to say.
That's interesting. It's all just very interesting. Like, I like that this has kind of become a discussion about scale. That's really what we're talking about. It's the scale of importance and this, like, physical scale, but also, like, metaphorical scale.
Yeah, well, because what I was thinking about, you were elaborating on that point was that it also kind of brings it onto your. I don't know. I've heard this described as I don't know if this is actually like a real term or not, or if this is just like I read this and really liked it. So if you've heard of this, let me know. But I was thinking of like kind of the idea of like of relative privilege, because people tend to think about things, I guess, like, you know, first world problems and stuff like that, and people tend to kind of like minimize their stuff because like in the grand scale of things it doesn't really matter as much. And it's this is something that, like, I guess personally I've had to kind of think about and work on, because that was very much a thing I used to think about in the past, and I've had to kind of come to terms with that and recognize, like, no, like, the stuff that I'm experiencing is still, it still matters. Like, there are definitely like bigger things out there, but that doesn't make the stuff that I'm trying to deal with kind of any less important to square away. So just another one of those like scale things, I guess.
That is so relevant in a very weird way, because I had like a pretty crummy day yesterday, and I recorded a podcast that now I have to post because I'm talking about it. What's that?
No, I said after you said you had a shitty day, I said I'm sorry as you were saying, and I recorded a podcast, so I was like, I'm sorry you had a shitty day, not that you recorded a podcast.
Oh, no, you should be sorry for both. But no, like, it was actually a really interesting experience because, and like, as I say this, like, I know I have to hold myself accountable, because it's going to get really confusing if I keep talking about this other podcast that I have and then never do anything with it.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have to put those up at some point, huh?
Yeah, that's going to happen. But I did record one yesterday, like, and I was trying to hold myself to account, because I, in previous like ones that I had done, that also are not posted yet, maybe by the time this one that we're doing right now is posted, there will be something to provide context. Who knows? But
if there is, we'll put a link
kind of
somewhere.
talk about what's that?
If there is, we'll put a link somewhere.
Oh yeah, it'll be accessible. It'll probably be on our channel, so we'll put a link, and we'll. There's a lot of stuff we can do that we might do if it ever happens. Are you in a tunnel?
Am I in a tunnel? Oh, I might have
been really quiet all of a sudden.
Oh no, sorry, that might have been just my bad mic etiquette. I was probably facing away from my mic while I was talking. So. Whoops.
No, I feel like you just got really quiet.
Oh yeah, no, that's never been a thing that's happened to me.
No, it's weird. It kind of like took me by surprise, because I'm like, Scott is not being super loud and talkative.
Yeah, that's never happened.
No, this is just us having technical difficulties. I don't know. I just figure we might as well. If anyone wants to know how to do a podcast, we're like the example of like all the things not to do, and we'll also help with all of the like logistical things.
Yeah, it's true. I've figured out about half of, I think, everything that we actually need to do. So it's been really good. It's been a fun process.
A learning experience for sure. Yeah. So what was I saying? Yeah, I recorded. I had a pretty crummy day, and I recorded it because I was like, I don't want to like. My instinct was I don't want to talk about this. Like, I'm still sick and I'm crabby and I'm having a shitty day. That is like a formula to not put that out into the universe. But then I thought, like, that's actually exactly what I'm trying to do with this whole thing, is hold myself to account and talk about stuff while I'm in it and while it's happening. And I think the fact that I did do a recording about it and I dug into that makes it even easier for me to be able to like talk about it now and to say, yeah, yesterday was a pretty shitty day. It makes it easier to say today is like a better day, and stuff like that continuum of like life it's not as like heavy as we sometimes make it, even if it's like, if it is heavy stuff or serious stuff, or like it's heavy. I guess it is heavy in theory, but we make it heavier than it has to be by stigmatizing it and by making it like, we can't talk about shitty days because we're all supposed to be happy all the time. Like, that's just not even logical.
And it traps you in it alone, right? Which is part of what makes it feel so much worse. Like, if you're not
exactly,
able to act on it.
Yeah, because you're like, I can't talk about it, and then it's like, then you're almost like living it longer than it existed because you feel like you can't say anything about it. You're just like, everything is perfect and like rainbows and butterflies, and then the badness of like a crappy day or a bad mood just sort of like eats away at, say, like that whole week or that whole month, because now you are like pretending that it didn't happen.
Totally. And like that, I mean, I guess this is just speaking from personal experience. Like, that also tends to have a compounding effect, because as it goes unaddressed, like as those days and experiences and everything pile up, like everything gets so much worse, right? Because you're just kind of letting it pile up and then shoving it down somewhere, and it's still there. You're just not doing anything about it.
Yeah, and eventually, like, whether you are conscious of it or not, like, you will do something with it. But if it's piled up, you have more, I guess, to deal with than the alternative. So it's interesting. So yeah, I did a recording about it, and I actually touched on exactly what you said. This idea of like, things can be shitty, and that like sometimes like it's actually a really empowering experience to say, I understand that like it's not all about me, and that like I'm not having, like, the things that are happening to me are not the worst in the world, or it could be worse, or all of these other kind of criteria you can put on it. But it doesn't mean it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't mean that it's not valid and it's not something that you're still going through in that moment. And I think it ties into what we were just saying about like piling on. If you shame yourself and tell yourself that your stuff is smaller just because other stuff is bigger, it has the same effect of piling on, because you're not really dealing with it, because you're telling yourself that you shouldn't feel how you feel about it.
And in doing so, making the whole thing worse, because not only are you minimizing it, but on top of it, you're telling yourself that all of these things you're feeling aren't real or aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, I don't know that we maybe recognize that us doing that to ourselves has the same effect as if somebody else was doing it to us. That feeling of like, if you were to bring an issue up with a friend or a loved one and they kind of minimize it, that objectively feels shitty. But do we recognize that we actually do that to ourselves just as successfully?
I don't think, personally, I don't think so. I've never, and granted, I haven't done a lot of looking, but I've never really seen anything that's kind of addressed the self component to all of that. So we might be breaking new ground. This might be us.
Yeah, that's just us, just like solving the world's problems again. Here we go.
Yeah, we got it.
I mean, I don't know if it's breaking ground. I don't know if it's a new concept. I highly doubt that it is, but
there's no way
it's something interesting that, yeah, we're almost we're almost too aware of like the impact of like what other people have. Like, we can sit alone and be like, oh, that thing that person said to me was really shitty. And yet the self-talk that is like, I think that's becoming a topic of discussion in like society, that we're talking more about like positive self-talk and like gratitude and all these things,
and
which
self-care
I personally still struggle with. Yeah, but that we can still, like, we can have just as much of a negative or positive impact on ourselves and like the self-talk that we do as an external person can have. And if we give that credit that it deserves, then we can stop it. Because, you know, like, me saying shitty stuff to myself or internalizing or saying that my stuff doesn't matter has just as much of a negative impact as if I told you something about me and you said that doesn't matter. Like, you know?
And possibly more, because
It's
honestly,
just
like,
as negative.
how much time do you spend with other people versus, like, if you're telling that to yourself, like, that never stops. Like, it doesn't go away. Like, you're with yourself.
You can't escape it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's such a good point. Like, you can even be conscious of a toxic person in your life and then just be like, I'm not going to be around them. But if you're not conscious of the fact that one of the toxic people could be yourself, like, how do you get away from that person? You have to change the way you talk to yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you have to be able to recognize that to begin with, and then also start to deal with. I find that part of everything very interesting, because for like I'm gonna go so far as to say the only advice or the only kind of information out there growing up was only ever about external sources. Like, it was always watching out for peer pressure, or watching out for bad people or bad things in your life. But there's very little about, like, hey, just so you know, like, your brain can kind of go bad on you every once in a while. Like, you need to be aware of that. And so, yeah, like I said, it's really only now, or really only within the last, like, few years, that I've even considered that something that I should be aware of.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I love that you've put it like that, because it's I don't know if it's something that we teach kids about. I know it was not something I was taught, and like you said, it's something you kind of had to come to learn, kind of fumbling along on your own, right? Like, it's not something that somebody, like, sat you down and was like, "Oh, sorry, I forgot to teach you this lesson. This is the how it is." Like, I don't think even, like, adults now know that, right? Like, how do we come to that?
Yeah, I think that a lot, or many of us probably don't. Quite honestly, like, it's one of those things that, like, I spend a lot of time thinking about stuff, and that was one of those things that I kind of had to that it took me a long time to get to. And, like, I am not and have never been someone who is, like, particularly smart about that stuff, or particularly aware of any of that stuff. It took me a long ass time to get there, so I can only imagine that people that are in or around my capacity, like, probably won't get there, or may not, or won't get there for some time. And that's really sobering, sad, kind of scary thing about life in 2017, I guess.
It is, yeah. It is unfortunate. Also that everyone is on a spectrum, right? Like you said, you don't really identify as being someone who, like, maybe is, like, as in tune with that stuff naturally. I consider myself someone who is, and it's still, and does still take me a long process to come to realizations like that. And I often think, like, this is something I do really well, is, like, understanding my feelings and digging into them and, like, looking at them as they are. And I will admit that I find it incredibly difficult, even though it comes very naturally to me. So it's made me more empathetic and compassionate, to realize that, like, I do myself a credit by admitting that it's a strength of mine. And then it also makes me very sad to know that if it's this hard for me in something that is one of the things in my life I'm the best at, where does everybody else land on that? And it's not a judgment. It truly does make me sad, not in a, like, sympathy or, like, I pity anybody kind of way, but just, like, it's hard to be a human. And there's a lot of layers of stuff that, like you said, like, we just maybe assume that we learn stuff as we get older, and that when, like, we have all these, like, formative lessons that we're supposed to come to. And there isn't a checklist, because there's things that people can go their whole life without knowing about themselves. So there isn't really a checklist.
Yeah, it's the idea of that, like, I guess at least the way that I thought of it when I was younger was that when you become an adult, like all of a sudden there's all this like so there would be like a manual, or someone would send me the newsletter, or there would be some stuff ready for me to do, and then I would know, and then it would be and then it was good, and it's some like it's only become more clear over the years that I've been quote unquote an adult, that none of that stuff is ready for you. It's earned. It's very much earned, but there's a lot of work, and none of that is spelled out for you, which is
and none of it is
crazy.
necessarily like a guarantee either, right? Like
Absolutely.
you mess up that shit even farther, and you add in like issues of privilege and class and, you know, socioeconomic. Like everything kind of compounds onto it, and then some people just don't have the same access to that stuff. But
And there's only become like more stuff to be aware of too. Like when you talk about privilege, when you talk about kind of all of those intersectional issues that we're only now even starting to kind of recognize and codify. Like that stuff wasn't as visible when like our parents, for example, were becoming adults,
right, yeah,
and so
and it's unfortunate as you say that, because the truth is that those pressures existed for the people that are influenced by them, but like there's a privilege in being able to be unaware of the fact that there's a privilege.
Sorry, I just had
to think about that.
Yep, no, I got it. Yeah, it's like it's really yeah, there is almost I mean, like, yeah, it's the idea that ignorance is bliss, right? Like it's just
there's always been people influenced by these issues, but like what your point was, there now more than ever there's a mainstream conversation around it. Like there's words we can use and there's ways that we can talk about it, but just because we have ways to do that, it doesn't make having the discussions any easier, and it doesn't make the answers any more attainable. It just means that now we're finally able to have a conversation about it.
Yeah, it's really it's really cool, and then but also in saying that it's another thing or another set of things that is added on to like that information that theoretically you come across in your life. And yeah, it's another one of those things like I have to believe and know that there are people out there who won't, and that's kind of like it's a problem that we're still figuring out.
I don't know if it's a problem that we'll ever figure out.
But
and that I don't know if that should make me sad. It does make me sad, but maybe that's just like life, and that the fact that not everybody has everything figured out to the same degree as the next person is kind of what makes each of us unique. But then, like we talked about this before, kind of that the way that we relate to other human beings is not in all the things we have, like the uniqueness. It's just the very fact that we are unique. That's what brings us together. But then how do we have those conversations around, like, does it make it harder to be that much more open to say, like, if I don't know this and I'm not in tune with this conversation or this thing about myself, then am I now open to coming to that through people that I know and conversations that I have, versus somebody that's just like, I don't know what I don't know and I never will, because if I needed to know it, then I would know it.
Sorry, I realize I'm leaving a lot of dead air here.
I was not. Am I being really confusing? I can't tell.
No, I think this is one of the this is one of those things that because we can't see each other, there's like sort of a different dynamic to this conversation. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. It's interesting, but it's weird.
Yeah, I don't really know what I just said, but I mean, I stand by it. Whatever it was. because while I was saying it, it felt like what I meant, but I don't know if it made a lot of sense. So my apologies to you and everyone listening. But yeah, all of this stuff is really cool.
It's cool. It's
but it
cool
does
that
make me
like it's
sad.
out in the open enough that at least like we can have a conversation about it, and I guess that's really the the unsaid mandate of this podcast that we never talked about is that we want this to be out there for people who are like us but don't have someone to develop these ideas with, or they haven't found that person like we have found each other to have this conversation. And so hopefully by putting it out there, it will help someone or some people. Hopefully a lot of people.
I love that. And I think that's a really good segue into saying that, like I've been listening to our previous ones, it still strikes me how much I talk over you. And I'm sorry about that. That constantly just like, I'm like, do I ever let the man talk? Like, what the fuck?
No.
And I feel so bad, but I'm also like, I know that, like, because it was easier when we were having the conversations where we were like together and we could see each other, because I can like listen to it and it comes across in a way that I don't love, but at least I know that in the moment, like I didn't feel like I was silencing you the way that I feel like when I listen to it, because you were across from me, and it felt like a very like equal dynamic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And you know what? I was actually and I'm gonna come back to sort of the beginning of this podcast when I was talking about all of those things I noticed about the way that I hold my end of the conversation on the podcast. One of those things was like, you know, like when I'm in a conversation with someone, normally, and a lot of people do this, like you say those little like uh-huhs or yas or whatever to like just to kind of indicate that you're still engaged in the conversation, even if you're not like actively the person who's talking. And I was doing that in the podcast, and I like without the element of like us actually having the conversation, it's just me saying yeah and uh-huh a lot, just in the middle of like your points and stuff, in these like weird little interruptions. It's just, yeah, there's just like weird pieces of the recording that like make sense as a conversation, but when you're listening to it back without that context, yeah, there's a lot of stuff that becomes really weird. So like I said,
yeah, it is really weird.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff now that I'm trying
from
not to do. So it like we were saying before, I guess, like this is not an authentic representation of how we talk to each other, and I'm interested to see what our recordings sound like when we keep doing this, like down the road, if we manage to make it a year, knock on wood, like listening to what the podcast sounds like then versus what the podcast sounds like when we started recording, and like how we sound when we talk to each other this way. I don't know. The idea of that is really fascinating.
Yeah. I'm interested even in what this one will sound like, because, like with that said, a combination of me being conscious of it's not the talking over you that really got to me. It was that I felt like I'm a rambler, but so are you. And it seems very natural when we're sitting across from each other and having the conversation, but on playback, it makes it just seem like we're talking at each other. And that's like, I kind of never was bothered by the, like, you know, those little things that you said, even listening to it, because it's a demonstration that you're still engaged and that I'm not just like silencing you, that you're like still part of the conversation.
Right.
But now that I'm conscious of it, and also that I'm still sick and I'm trying not to like have a coughing fit, like I'm curious if there's a lot more like even balance between what we're both saying in our exchange of ideas. And it's hard for me because I don't ever want like you or anybody else to feel like I'm not hearing you when you talk, and that I'm not listening with as much excitement or kind of commitment as I talk, because I do talk a lot, and I know that about myself. And I think that because like we're both conscious of different things, this might sound a little different than any of our other ones, just because we've had that time to listen to them back. And also that we can't see each other right now too. There's another layer to that.
It's true, yeah, which like might actually be the weirdest part of this whole thing. If I'm being honest.
Is it really wigging you out? Like, I don't know if it bugs me that much.
It's so strange because like this is 90% of my social interaction. Like when I'm gaming with people, like and literally like this program that we're using is how I talk to a lot of people in my life for a large percentage of my life. Yeah, I don't know, it's weird. I guess it was maybe because I've only talked to you like face to face before.
Like it's because it's us. It's like the way that we talk. Like, and this is weird. It's weird for me in the sense that like I don't talk to you on the phone, and essentially that's what we're doing.
Yeah, that's absolutely what it is. It's just like because it's a different way of talking to you specifically. If we had met this way and like this is the only way that I'd ever talk to you, then yeah, whatever, totally fine.
I was actually thinking about that recently, about how like you categorize people and the way you communicate is so vastly different between like other people in your life. Like it's weird how it just sort of kind of happens. And I don't think the reason this is weird, it has nothing to do with the fact that
specifically, or are you talking about like people?
Well, kind of both. But like in this case with you specifically, this isn't weird that it's being recorded. And I thought that that's what would be weird. But I'm noticing as you mentioned that it's more weird just because we don't ever talk on the phone like this.
Right. Yeah. Like and
it has like nothing to do with the fact that we're going to be putting this like phone call on the internet.
Yeah, it's just the mode of communication. In the same way that it would be really weird if like one of the people that I talk to almost exclusively through Facebook like phoned me all of a sudden, or like we met up, like which would be fine. It would just be weird because I'm used to like a certain way of talking to this person.
And that's what I meant, like kind of theoretically and generally speaking. Like I was thinking about this while I was driving the other day, because I have I talk to very few people like in my car on Bluetooth.
Right.
Mostly because like I have a pretty decent sound system in my car, like compared to my other car, but I still don't use it because I don't have the patience for like, all it takes is somebody being like, "What'd you say?" And then I'm just like, I'm automatically like anxious and stressed out, and I'm just like, I want to like yell. Like I refrain from it, but it's just, there's something uniquely frustrating about talking to somebody, whether you're talking to someone who's in their car on their Bluetooth or you're being the person in the car on your Bluetooth, where there's like a technical difficulty or somebody's like, "What? I can't hear you."
Like
what?
As soon as there's some sort of disconnect.
I lost you again. Huh?
Like as soon as there's some sort of like disconnect or like something that disrupts the flow of the conversation.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And even like that, I just had to ask you to repeat yourself, but it's like, that's different because I'm not also having to operate a motor vehicle.
Right.
And so it's like, it's a totally different experience. And I think that's what's weird for me about this more than anything, is there's been a couple times where, and I don't know how it'll present on the recording of us talking, but where you say something and then I can't hear you because you're not in the room. And it's a different, that dynamic is almost making, maybe this is what we need because it makes us slow down our communication.
It definitely does. Like even just thinking about like this episode, this is the most that we've ever had like an actual, that we've actually like alternated the conversation and haven't just like started talking over each other as a new point starts.
Exactly. Because if we do, we can't hear the other person.
Yeah, it's super. It's
weird. Almost like technology is like forcing us to be respectful, and that's pretty terrible.
It's true. This might actually like maybe this was a bad idea from the start, because this is totally going to turn us into just every other podcast where we're just talking like regular.
Well, I think we still talk faster than regular people.
We're still definitely talking faster than regular people.
That might
also be the cold thing. Like, I'm wondering when we're both healthy and doing this, if it'll be a little closer to how we listened before. I think I told you, like, I listened to this is again coming back to listening back to our podcast, but like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of the ones that I listen to are people talking, or like interviews, and stuff like that. It's spoken word stuff, and to get through more of it, or to get through it, I speed everything up to about 1.4 or 1.5 times like the regular recording speed. And in the previous episodes, like, we were still talking faster, or like at least as fast as like my sped up podcasts. And I thought that.
Yeah, and you said that to me, and I couldn't believe it, because when I listen to ours, I still feel like listening back to them, they should be faster.
Yeah, totally.
So I think I would not be able to listen to a regular podcast, like, ever, because I don't even know, like, how that would work. And like we talked about too, if we talked at that speed, it would be like a 5-hour podcast.
Easily.
I was thinking about the way people talk. Actually, I want to get back to that, because so the thing I was thinking about with like calling people is I don't talk to people in my car, but I only have like one person in my life. Well, maybe, I guess, like 2 people. But I'm related to both of them. So like, my dad would be the one that I wasn't really, so I guess my dad counts. But the person I was thinking about is my cousin, who's also one of my closest friends. She's the only person, save for, I guess, my dad, who I can comfortably use every mode of communication with. And it feels just as authentic. And I have some outliers to that, but like, I was thinking about it, and like, one of my like closest friends, who you also know, her and I can't talk on the phone. And I don't know if she's going to listen to this and be like, what do you mean we can't talk on the phone? Like, I haven't like broached this subject with her.
They're going to listen to it and then like immediately call you and like try and force it or something.
Like, she'll call me. She'll be like, so I hear that we can't talk on the phone. It's something that I've noticed that the few times, like, I could probably count on my hand the number of times in, like, I want to say 6 or 7 years that I've known her, that we've actually spoken on the phone. And it's very, like, clinical.
Okay. Well,
I feel like,
do you talk on the phone a lot in general, though?
I actually do. Like, I mean, not anymore. This is the example, like, my cousin, who I'm very, very close with. I mean, I would consider her my friend before I'd consider her my cousin. So that's like an interesting thing to talk about, because like, I don't want to separate her and be like, I don't want to say she's my cousin, because it almost sounds like I'm lessening our friendship in a way. She's one of my closest friends.
Right.
And I think because we're related and we've known each other our whole lives, maybe that's why we can talk on the phone, because like we have a different kind of dynamic in that way. And like, you know, we'll like spend holidays together and that kind of thing. It's already different than other people that I have in my life. But I can text her, I can see her in person, I can talk to her on the phone. And the nature of those conversations are pretty stable across platforms. Whereas my other friend that I was talking about, like, we will just get together, like, we'll have dinner, we'll have coffee. Like, we've sat in, like, I'll drop her off or she'll drop me off from somewhere, and we'll sit on the driveway and just talk in our, like, the car for like 3 hours. Like, we can talk, we do that, but we just never do it over the phone. Like, we'll make plans and we'll get together, and then we'll have like a 5-hour conversation, but we don't just talk on the phone. And it's almost with her, it would be like weird to talk on the phone. And that's not like a bad thing. It's just, it's like weird to me why that is, because I have a friend from high school who is very similar in that way, where I don't text her. So that's the other thing. I don't love texting.
Okay.
And there are people where I'll have like long texting conversations with, but it's not my ideal mode of conversation. And I have some friends, like my friend from high school, who like, we don't do that. And we can have like long introspective discussions. Like we will talk, we will cry, we will like get into the deep shit about life, but we never do it over text. So with her, we will talk on the phone if we have to. Like if we're busy and we can't get together, we're not going to text. And if something big is happening in one of our lives, we'll talk on the phone. But by and large, it's like our text messages are, hey, I miss you. We should get together. Okay, are you free Saturday? Okay, I'll see you there.
It's
that's it.
It's like the prelude to whatever you're actually planning on doing.
Yeah. It's just really weird. And that's like 3 people as an example. And I have completely different communication styles with each of them. It's just so weird.
That is interesting. It's also interesting because if I'm thinking about myself, like I almost exclusively text or instant message, like either to make plans so that we hang out in person. Like I guess like the phone part of it like never enters in as a possibility for me. Like that's my least favorite way of talking to anyone.
But like what about like this? Like if you're gaming or you're talking to somebody, like you have some friends that live in different cities than you. So do you talk to them like in a method that uses your voice?
Yeah, it's this, like literally it's this. So maybe that's kind of the thing is like
but I don't that's really, like the phone that counts.
And it's weird because like I don't really think of it that way, but like as you're saying that I'm like, oh yeah, actually I guess I kind of like technically I kind of do, but it's always like the thing that always precedes me getting onto like a voice channel like this is always instant messaging or some sort of chat system or something like that. Like it's like for me, most of the time when I think about like needing to talk to someone, it'll always start with instant message or text.
And that's what's interesting. Like I don't mean it's like not like a phone call like traditionally, but I like talking to people, obviously. Like I like having communication and connection with people. And to me, it's very hard to do that over a text or an IM or that kind of thing. So like there's a hierarchy of how I want to communicate. And the ideal is that I want to see somebody in person and I want to talk to them for like 8 hours about like deep life shit. That's like my perfect world. And I also want the person across me to be somebody that I like genuinely enjoy and want to spend time with. Because I don't want to talk for like 8 hours with someone that I have nothing in common with, right? But texting and IM like doesn't appeal to me. But it's really good for making plans. And then if I have to, I'll talk on the phone with someone. But it's like the way that we conceptualize what that means almost, where like my cousin could call my home phone or my cell phone and I wouldn't think anything of it. And I would pick up the phone and I would be like, hey, like, what's up? But there's other people, like my other friend, and like, this is getting confusing because I'm not using anyone's names because I don't want to like, I don't want to use people's names.
We still haven't,
if I don't, you know, like they're on the podcast.
So
yeah, so it's getting really confusing because I'm like my friend from high school and then like there's my person and then there's the person you know, but you know who I'm talking about.
I know who you're talking about.
And like we might end up like living together at some point and then maybe it'll totally like in that case I don't think it would be weird, but right now because we're not living together, if she were to call me, I would probably be scared. Like to be very honest, like
would you think she was like in danger or something, like it's an emergency?
Yeah, like I would be like, is everything okay? Like I would be concerned, I think. And I think that that's almost it because I bet you if I called her right now, she'd probably react in a similar way.
Oh, you should
like, it would probably be like,
do it for the podcast.
It'd be like, hello? What's up? Like, and it's not even to say like, I'm sure there's people that call her and it's normal, but if I was one of them, even though we're like best friends, it might be weird. But then if we live together, I think it would change the dynamic. And so if I like called her, like she'd be like, what, do we need milk? Like it would change it enough. But I was thinking about this the other day that just like, she's probably the person in the world I'm the closest to. And I don't want her to call my phone. Like it's so weird. Like not because I don't like her, but because I would rather go for coffee with her or because I'd be worried that something's wrong, I think. So yeah, it's an interesting thing about it's not the phone that's the problem. Because if it was my cousin, I'd be like, hey, so what's going on? And it would be totally different. Yeah, it's interesting.
That's interesting that yours changes from person to person, because mine's just
Yeah,
with, like, the medium of communication. Like,
and it's still medium you prefer, and so it doesn't change to person, but for me, it's actually like the dynamic of the relationship determines the communication style that's normal.
That sounds exhausting. Like, you have to have
it is exhausting, and like I never
you have to like keep a different like communications profile for like each person in your life. Whereas I'm just like, I just don't like having phone conversations.
It's exhausting to think about. Like, this conversation about it makes it feel exhausting, but it isn't.
No, I'm sure it's a very like reflexive thing for you, like as you go about your life.
It is. It's not something I ever really put a lot of thought into until I did. And then I realized, like, because for me, it's the normal. But when I thought about it, I was like, this is actually kind of weird. Like, is everyone else like this? And so that's why, yeah, that's interesting that for you, it's just preference, and that you kind of, you mold your relationships around the modes of conversation that work for you. Like, in general, like, you're basically who dictates that, whereas I let my relationships dictate that.
Yeah. Huh. Sorry, now I'm just thinking about like everyone in my life and like how. Yeah, no, this is super interesting. I
like talking on the phone to me reminds me of being in like junior high and high school, like before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before I texted a lot, I talked on the phone a lot, like in junior high.
Yeah, I did as well. Like well, this is gonna date me, so this is gonna be awesome. But like, when I was in junior high and high school, cell phones weren't commercially available, so my only option was to call people over the phone. And so then it was fine because it was the only thing I could do. But then as that stuff started coming out, like, text and IM became much more popular. And so I'm sure part of it is just because like that was the phase in which I was talking to like the most people in my life, and so that's why
you needed a mode to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So that like helped quite a bit. But I think it's also because like I like, in order of preference, I would like to be face to face with a person, and so calling them on the phone is kind of like inherently frustrating because like it gives me that sensation of like being able to talk to them, but because I'm missing all of the other pieces of the like face-to-face encounter, it's just kind of like frustrating, if that makes sense. So that's why I would rather just go all the way down to text and instant messaging, because like the phone call for me is like, well, why aren't we just hanging out? Like, what is the point of this? I don't understand.
I agree completely, except the way that it manifests for me is the opposite, because it's like, if we're talking or if we're texting, I'm like, why aren't we talking in a real way? And if we're not, then why are we talking at all? Like, I'm kind of just like, let's stop talking, period. And now that I think about it too, like, I think this is actually why I find dating so exhausting.
Oh.
Is because since, like, you're like, oh, we're going to get into that. Like, yes, I find dating exhausting. Because it is. I do. I really do. I talk on the phone a lot when I'm dating, and it's horrible.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You're like, I understand you so much now.
I know. You know what? That was like, because we've talked about this before, but I didn't know this piece that you were doing a lot of this like over the phone, and a lot of stuff makes a lot more sense to me now.
That's a very good.
Because I was assuming when you were doing all of this, like you were just like messaging people. And so it was like, and I get like even that can get a little bit tedious, but it was like,
oh no, like, yes, there is, quick,
but like,
don't think that I automatically start talking to people. It's not like that. It's more of like, once I get to a period in talking to somebody, it moves from messaging to phone calls, usually around the same time that we're actually meeting in person. Like, they're kind of like balance between in person and on the phone, because I really don't like texting, especially at that point in time in a relationship. And
okay,
it makes me a very unpopular person. And it also means that I've broken my rule a lot and I won't do it anymore because, like, I always say that. And now it's recorded. So, like,
yeah,
I'm putting it out there. Now I have to hold myself accountable.
There's
for
a matter
years,
of record.
I've said, for years I've said I'm not texting somebody new that I meet. And I always break the rule and I always justify that. I'm like, oh, well, like, we'll just text a little bit. And like, to the point that I actually like made rules internally where I'm like, I'm allowed to text them if it's under like 140 characters. I'm like, that doesn't work because then they're having a conversation with me.
If I could send them a tweet, then it's okay. Or if I could send it as a tweet.
Yeah. And I'm not kidding. I actually had a thought because I thought that and then I was like, if I'm going to do that, maybe we just do our entire like beginning of the relationship over social media, like publicly. So it's like the only stuff you're allowed to like text, converse with me has to be over like Twitter or Instagram or something. And I was like, for like a period of time, I thought this was a great idea.
Man,
and then I just stopped dating.
Here's the thing, though, is that now that you said that, I actually think that's a really good idea, and I kind of wish that was an actual thing.
I know, right? Okay. So here's the thing. I think it's a terrible idea because I don't think other people would get on board with it, but I think it's a genius idea because it would police me enough that I'd be able to live by my own principles. And like the reason I hate texting is because it becomes like these big conversations and it doesn't matter how much you like try to avoid them and you say like, oh, like I prefer to get to know somebody like in person or over the phone and I don't want to get to know them behind like a texting screen kind of thing.
Right.
Naturally conversations come up and they just come up because like life is hard and like you work and you're busy and you can't always see people. And so then like something will come up and then you have to have some conversation.
Sorry, you're
hard to just be like, oh, that's a good question. Like, let's talk about it on Saturday when I see you. Like, people don't really do that anymore in the advent of all these other ways to communicate. People want answers now. And I don't like it. So yeah, I'm like, if you do it on social media, maybe it would hold everyone accountable that like you're literally only saying stuff like, okay, let's get together at this place or let's do this. And it's like, okay, text me the address. And that's the only thing you can like text privately is like location information.
It's like the dating equivalent of like, you know how some cities have those like Craigslist meeting spaces so that people who are selling stuff online can like meet up and there's like a safe environment to do that in.
Yeah, exactly. I think that would be, I mean, I don't know. Do you think other people would use that?
I mean, listen, I'm a bad person to ask because I'm like the least successful person on the planet when it comes to like online dating and stuff, but like I kind of think it's a good idea though, to be quite honest. Like,
I mean, that's because online dating is terrible. It's a nightmare hellscape and I don't think anyone is actually good at it. Like people that are like, I love online dating and I'm good at it and it's like a hobby and an activity. I'm like, okay, I don't want to talk to you. Like I don't trust those people.
I don't know. I'd be super interested in like meeting someone who does that. Like not meeting someone like that way, but just like talking to someone who who like habitually uses it or something like that. I would just be really interested to see
somebody that like sees it as a hobby. Yeah, like I've dated that person. And like if you think that the kind of person that like looks at online dating as a hobby is a good person to be in a relationship with, you would be incorrect.
Oh, I don't think that at all. I just like want to meet that person.
No, you don't.
I'll take your word for it, I guess.
But like, I'm not in the spirit of like bashing people. Like that's not what this podcast is about. But like, no, you don't. But like, for curiosity's sake, if there's any people that like self-identify as a person who does that and like wants to like chat with us about it, like you do you, but just like know that I'm not going to date you is basically what I'm saying. Like, I don't have any interest in like dating that person. But yeah, like if you want to like be a part of the conversation, you're welcome to like drop us a line.
And you can do that at Oh man, I don't remember the email address. I think it's questions
thoughts at continuouschaos.
Oh, it is thoughts. It's thoughts at continuouschaos.ca. There we go. I forgot I changed it. It was originally questions.
I knew it.
Yeah, but now it's thoughts, because I realized that like if I put questions as the email address, then it like the address kind of limits it or kind of gives off the idea that we only are taking questions to that address. But like I
actually love that it's thoughts. I think that's really clever, because like, why would anyone have questions if we open it up to questions? Like, actually, people should almost exclusively have questions, because like, why?
Oh, people must have questions, absolutely. But anyways, I realize like
they're allowed to have thoughts that aren't fully formed into questions.
Exactly. So if you have anything, questions, comments, concerns, considerations you'd like to send to us, thoughts at continuouschaos.ca. I believe I put that in the description of every video also. But yes. Yeah, feel free to drop us a line.
Yeah, that's there. So we have to wrap up soon, but I wanted to.
Sorry, I'm trying so hard not to say like, comment, and subscribe, but I feel like it's kind of someone's duty on this podcast since we're putting it on YouTube, even though I kind of hate it.
I do too. That's why I won't be saying it. But I mean, I'll say things like drop us a line and like join the conversation. That actually brings up a point that I wanted to make about. So like, I don't know how we got into the discussion about dating and Twitter. Oh yeah, like I talk on the phone a lot when I'm dating, and it's kind of a lot of work, if I'm being honest, because it's like you're working really hard to get to know someone, and you're also using a medium that you might not otherwise use a lot. Like I talk on the phone at work when I'm working, and I talk on the phone with certain people. But when it's like a situation where you're trying to get to know a brand new person, it's like overload. Like, it's a lot. And I don't get a lot done. Like, you think you can talk on the phone and do other stuff, but if you're like trying to like make a concerted effort to get to know a person and you're talking on the phone, it's like you're not getting ready and going out on a date. You're like at home and you could get stuff done, but you're not, because you're focused on the conversation.
Well, yeah, because that phone call still requires like most to all of your attention. So it's
exactly, and I mean, as it should. And I think that that's another reason why like texting. I think some people like texting because like they can do it while doing other things. And I don't text that way, because if I get into a conversation where I'm having long text discussions, it's not conducive either to getting stuff done. So I just kind of feel like at mercy of my phone, and so I might as well just be talking on it, and we can get to things faster, and I don't have to type them out. And I understand why other people, and I don't know if this is a gender thing or just a thing, I don't know, but I don't really like to multitask when I'm doing either one. But maybe when people text, they're able to multitask. Because when I talk on the phone with people, when I'm in that period of getting to know them, without fail, they will all multitask when I'm not. And so like, you're talking to somebody that you've met like a week ago, and now they're doing their dishes, or they're like doing their laundry, or, and it's like, you can hear like pots like clanging, and you can hear like the laundry, and and I'm like, okay, if I was texting you, I wouldn't know what you're doing, but I would still be wasting my time. Does that make sense?
So really, this is
I don't know if that just made me sound like a terrible person.
No.
Basically, like, I don't like online dating because people on online dating are terrible. And I want to be able to get to know someone where they're putting as much attention into it as I am, basically.
So I think what I was hearing there, I think anyways, was that it's not so much about like how you're communicating, it's that there are uneven expectations around what that communication means for you and the other person.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. And I think that the way that people text, like we were talking about when we were in like junior high school, like I'm slightly younger than you are, but not by a whole lot. But I got a phone, and I didn't text for a few years after I had phones. Like, even though I had cell phones, I didn't use them.
I'm gonna say I didn't either. Like that was something that definitely
texting wasn't a thing.
No, it like grew over time, but like it wasn't. People
and it grew very it kind of exploded. And so like I don't even feel like when we were in like those formative years, and people, whether they had phones or not, they still were not used to the degree they are now. And it was different. And so now that texting has exploded, there's almost this expectation where then there was the expectation you didn't text, and now there's this expectation that you do, and that you should always be accessible, and that you should always be reachable, and that you're going to like kind of be multitasking but also not. And I don't know what to do with that. For me, it just doesn't align with the way I live my life.
So for me, and that's actually really interesting, because like the way that I think about texting is, yeah, like I think absolutely there's a piece where like you can kind of engage to the degree that you want to, like whether that's responding immediately or whether you're kind of texting like while doing other stuff and stuff like that. But the reason that I really like it is that I guess it's in recognition of like, everyone's really busy. I'm trying to spend we're trying to figure out if we want to spend time with each other, so it's kind of nice because I'm not like fully imposing myself on that person by texting. But also, like, I personally feel like I express my ideas maybe not better but more clearly over text, and it's nice to be able to like have that record, so that like there's kind of I can kind of look back and be like, oh yeah, like this is what's going on, this is what we're talking about, stuff like that. So it allows us to have like a quality conversation while we go about our busy lives and stuff like that. Like that's how I think about it, and that's why I prefer it over phone conversations in general.
Maybe like this perspective will make me more compassionate to other people. Hopefully, like maybe if I look at it like other people look at texting like you do. But I feel like almost the exact opposite, because I don't feel like I don't express myself the way that I want to over text. Like I'm a very emotive person, and so I like to have something that I can like get back.
Okay, yeah.
But like I don't find texting to be a quality conversation, because I don't really know if I have a reason for why. I don't equate text conversations to quality. And it's actually so funny that you said like having a record, because I was talking to a guy on text, and we were like having like a joking kind of funny argument, but like in my opinion he was taking it too far.
Okay.
Just like he was trying to be like a know-it-all. And he like went back in the conversation to prove points.
Oh, fascinating.
Like he was like, but here you said this, and then there you said this, and then over here you said it like this.
Okay, yeah. So that's like a weird thing to do. I just mean like in the sense that like it's kind of nice because we might be kind of stepping away from the conversation on occasion, that like we can go back.
No, yeah, like I understand what you mean.
Yeah, I also see what you're getting at. That's a really weird thing to do.
But like in anything, if you take like kind of like a garbage person, like they're going to be that no matter how you talk to them.
They'll find ways to be garbage across whatever medium they're using to communicate.
And that's really like all I'm saying. Like I'm not blaming the mode of communication on like some of the experiences I've had.
For sure.
That just reminded me of it. And yeah, it's nice when you have something you can go back to if you're using it as kind of just like a very like non-committal thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's the non-committalness about it that bugs me, because it's like it's almost like texting is very non-committal until it isn't, and then all of a sudden the other person might expect it to become like, okay, now we're having a conversation. And at that point, to me, it's like, that's where you call me on the phone.
Oh, right. It's like it's moved up to the next point where,
like, if we're gonna do this and we're gonna like start talking about like my feelings about the world, like I don't want to do that over text. And maybe it sounds like I'm being inconsistent, but I have no problem with someone calling me out on stuff. And that's where that conversation really devolved for me, because I do sometimes sound inconsistent, and I know that. And it's interesting because I was reading a blog about my personality type the other day, and they made a comment about inconsistency, and it was like the sky opened up and like the sun shone on my face. I was just like, oh my god, this understands me. Because it is hard to be like so passionate about stuff and so opinionated, and then when people, not everyone sees this, and the people that do, I really respect the fact that they're paying enough attention to be like, hey, your opinions change, but it's how they do it. And so like sometimes if they're like, if they're a personality type, or they're just like a kind of person who sees the way that I am as like a threat, they get very defensive about it.
Sure.
And that's not where my inconsistency comes from. It's actually just because I genuinely am able to see all the sides of something. And so I flip-flop from like an empathetic perspective, but I still know where I stand. But that's why sometimes I have a hard time being like, this is where I stand on this issue. Because on some issues, I don't have a stance because I can see all the points. And so it's hard for me to land anywhere. But I'm still an opinionated person about stuff I'm passionate about. So it provided context to something I never really understood about myself before. And we talked about this, about how I really envy your ability to just have opinions and just stand behind them.
Sure.
And I think that's really cool. And I do it for something.
One thing I love, it's digging my heels in.
It's very confusing. Yeah, like how sometimes I'm just like, I don't know. It's just, it's freaky to me sometimes when someone's paying so much attention to what I'm saying that they're like, over here you said this and over here you said this. And I'm like, you're noticing things about me that you don't know me well enough to understand why I am that way. And so it's kind of like, it doesn't jive in that situation, because I'm like, I can't defend myself because you're not wrong, but there's a lot about me you don't know.
There's also some additional layers of context that you're not aware of yet.
Yeah, but on the surface, like, I totally get it. It makes me sound like an inconsistent person. So I have no issue with any mode of conversation that like can call me out on my inconsistency. But I would prefer that maybe that's it. Maybe that I want to leave those to people who know me well enough to like dig through those layers and understand like the why of things before they're exposed to like my inconsistencies. Maybe, I don't know.
Interesting.
But next time I want to talk about like personalities on radio and stuff. I don't think we have time right now, but it's something that just keeps coming up for me when we were talking about our the way that we sound on recordings, and then like I don't want to just sound like any other podcast in that way that you said. But I also don't want to start sounding like a radio show, because radio shows really bother me.
Like all radio shows?
No, but just like, you know, like the radio, like maybe it's because of like how surface level the things they talk about are, because they have to like appeal to everyone kind of thing.
And they're also doing
they're
it
just
for like
too
all day.
Excited about stupid shit.
Oh, so you're talking about the like the real like entertainment based like I'm totally falling over. I can't remember the word that I was going for right there, but yeah, all right. We'll talk
like
about that
like
next episode.
Radio shows where they play music and then they like talk and they have silly
like,
conversations
in between, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, that's essentially what we're doing, but I hope what we're doing is different, because I don't want to do that.
If you want a soundboard, though, that's certainly an option.
We could make that cool. It's more just like the quality of how they talk, and they're good. Like, this is what they do as a job, and that's awesome, and I respect that. I just don't want that to be what this is, because it kind of grates on my nerves a little. Like the whole, like, they're almost like caricatures. Like, they're too animated about stuff that's like, they're not passionate about any of it.
Oh yeah, they're definitely,
but they're over animated about all of it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And I think we're trying hard not to be caricatures or caricatures. That's not a word.
Characters.
Thank you. Characters or caricatures of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Which we will be to a degree. Like, that's just kind of the nature of doing. Oh,
that's just
like
what happens. Yeah. But I don't want it to like change the quality of my voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we'll talk about that. I wanted to bring up, because this was something that we wanted to bring up at some point in a previous episode, and I was thinking about it as we were talking about Velociraptors. I was thinking about compartmentalization.
That was a long time ago.
That was a really long time ago. But
You're thinking about what now?
Compartmentalization was something that you had mentioned wanting to talk about in a previous episode as well. So we'll do one or the other, maybe both. We'll see if we can get there. And
or we'll do neither, and we'll just talking about them later.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you back at a certain Patreon tier, maybe we'll eventually do an episode about all of the stuff that we talked about wanting to do an episode about.
It's just going to keep adding. There's going to be a really long list. There already is a really long list. I really enjoy how at the end of, like, on the descriptions of all of them, you put all of like what we talked about.
Yeah, I did my best. That was pretty
it
hilarious.
Makes it really seem like nothing makes sense, but it really makes it seem like we accomplished something.
Yeah,
so absolutely. I enjoy it.
Totally.
But it's fun to look at it, like, before you listen and to go, like, how did they get from there to there? Like, that's weird.
Yeah, which I think was originally like in one of the previous iterations of the podcast. I think that was kind of the unifying idea behind what we were doing, was we were going to put, like, the first thing we started talking about and the last thing we started talking about, and then that would be the hook for people to try and figure out how we got from the start to the finish. I think that was something that we were using as, like,
that rings a bell,
prompt, right?
And at least it's consistent. It's lasted. It's had some, like, staying power over these many years. Yeah. That it's a simple enough concept, but we're random enough that we can hold ourselves to it. Which I like.
Exactly. Yeah. It's been working out so far. I mean, I
don't know who's listening to these, but it's working out for us.
Yeah, but if you're listening, leave your comments. You can comment on the YouTube video, or, like we said earlier, thoughts at continuouschaos.ca.
And if you comment or send emails, we might talk about them here. So
I can guarantee we'll talk about them here.
I don't know if that's like a be warned, or if that's supposed to, like, encourage people to do it. I almost feel like that will deter people. But if we were any good, that would be something that people would, like, be encouraged by. So that's something for us to achieve later, I guess.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. It'll be exciting.
Okay, well, that's it from us. Yeah, this has been Continuous Chaos.